Everyone. Mentoring Lounge, brought to you by the International Mentoring Community. I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I'm one of the co-founders, and with me is Doug Lawrence. And we're going to share a little bit more about who we are, but what we thought we would do is just give you a sense of where we're going today. And we're going to be taking a look at a topic near and dear to our hearts called words, more words, and the words that keep moving mentoring forward. One of the things that we find while we're doing our work is people get confused around certain words as they apply to mentoring. Sometimes you hear things like, well, is it mentoring or is it coaching or is it both or whatever? You hear topics like that. Does mentoring really work? So what? Does mentoring really make a difference in someone's life? All these kind of topics come up. So Doug and I thought we would bring a little bit more clarity and also lean in some words that we think are of great value to helping you understand more about mentoring. So we're also going to be going over a Quora question, which is something that Doug always does on these shows, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But for those of you who don't know who we are, I am the Director of Education and Certification for the International Mentoring Community. It's an organization that started about 4 years ago, and Doug and I co-founded. And Doug, you want to share about what you do?
Sure. My name is Doug Lawrence, and I'm the one of the co-founders of the International Mentoring Community. I'm also the Director of Practice and Outreach.
Yeah, and we both have our own companies, and we got together and said, hey, why don't we do something here for the world of mentoring? And we've leaned it into the ISO world, the International Standards Organization world, and even the Criminal Code of Canada. And another day, we'll probably touch on that again. If not, you can go to the blog on our website, internationalmentoringcommunity.com. You can look up ISO and Criminal Code. There's an article there that gives you the overview of what we're doing. And I think what we'll do, Doug, is we'll jump into the topic today about words, more words, and the words that keep moving mentoring forward. But just before we do that, we are going to encourage you, please subscribe to the channel. It's always great when we get more subscriptions because it helps with the algorithm and moves us along and gets us in front of more people. And of course, please comment. We enjoy reading your thoughts as well. So I'll get us started, I think, today, Doug, and then what we'll do is we'll just sort of go back and forth a little bit here. So there will be some sense of definitions that will be given. Also leaning into some words that we think are really important that are connected to mentoring. So it's going to be a little bit more of a free-for-all than it is like a formal presentation. So let's see how this unfolds. So one of the first things that I would share, and this is something I always bring up no matter where I am when I'm talking about words and definitions and connections between words, is that words matter. I don't think any one of us would probably dispute that words matter, but maybe we need to also understand that there are no absolute words. Is that words are the freezing of reality for the moment they're heard and read. Sometimes they are frozen for a while, but often they melt away. And I always remember the story of the time that I was working in Australia, and I was working with a group of Indigenous Aboriginal youth to the area where I was working. And I was explaining to them I was from Canada and there's snow and all these kind of things. And the kids had that sort of look on their face. And so I went to the freezer of in the schoolroom, and I chipped away a little bit of ice and I brought it out and sort of created a little and sort of threw it on the desk. And I said, well, that's ice, that's snow, and that's what we live with. And they sort of got it. But again, it was, how do I get across the idea of cold and cool and coolish as compared to hot and hot and hot and warm and all these kind of things around where I was. So it always reminded me is that sometimes we may use words. We attempt to get someone to understand what's going on, but sometimes meaning is lost. And so how can you actually get the words that fit and make sense for what it is that we're looking at? And I know that when we go to use words and the words that are linked to mentoring and keeping mentoring moving forward, one of the things is that there's quite a bit of reflecting that's needed and educating. I, for one, and Doug and I have talked about this many times, and whenever we're sharing with people who are looking to become mentors, we keep saying, hey, listen, you have to keep reflecting. It's not something, I'll just do it once in a while. No, you got to keep reflecting on your practice. And Doug being one who's deep in the practice, he's reflecting all the time using his mentoring log and being able to just work through, did that work? Didn't that work? Is that true, Doug? Let me give it to you in your words. What do you think?
No, that's true. Because I try to reflect as I'm going to a mentoring session. So I'm forward reflecting and looking at what the potential for where we're going to go with the conversation, where I assume or think we're going to go. And then conversely, I also do it on my way home after a mentoring session. And I look at it from what went well, like you had mentioned, what went well, what didn't go well, and what do we do different next time. But definitely reflection and words go hand in hand.
Yeah, and actually being able to learn more and continue to learn is really important. But it's also the deepening of the practice of the mentoring in and of itself as well. And that's why that reflection is there, to your point about, what went well, what didn't go so well, and where can we improve it as we move forward. I think there's a phrase also that I would like to put in that is important here, and it's when you listen, you learn, where you share, you educate. And therefore, mentoring, and we're going to dive into it just a little bit more and give our definition of it. But I just wanted to step back a little bit and just remind us is that when you listen, you learn, and therefore, who's influencing you? And if you're going to serve as a mentor or you're listening to the mentee that you're interacting with, who's influencing them? Who's influencing you? And really pay attention to that because you're learning. And sometimes we just forget that and we just sort of let things happen. And I am very, very aware of where I'm receiving my insights and my investigations and my interpretations. I'm really paying attention to that, especially in this very deafening noise days that are unfolding around us at this point in time. But the other thing is where you share, you educate. So you influence who? And if you're not mentoring, that means it's very clear when you're mentoring that you're influencing, but also when you're just simply sharing who you are, the behaviors that you're demonstrating, you are sharing, you are educating others about who you are. And showing up late to mentoring, you're educating. Leaving early without due respect to what's going on, you are educating. These are things to be taking into consideration. So this notion of when you listen, you learn, where you share, you educate, think about it in the widest sense about what's happening for you. There's another element here, and I sort of, at one point in my career, I just sort of went by it. I didn't stop and really reflect on this. And the phrasing is that you love to learn what you educate. And I just sort of, okay, fine, yeah, great. Yeah, another one of those wonderful little phrases that people pop in and off you go. And it wasn't until I really slowed down a little bit and I went, hang on, it is true. I love to educate on certain kinds of topics. There's others I'm not going to touch. I so enjoy being a mentor versus being a coach. And therefore, this is where it really started to become really important to me, the use of the words that I was bringing forward. But more importantly, what became apparent was how I learn isn't necessarily how I'll educate. And that, there was a frozen fish up the side of the head for me at one point when someone said, no, okay, you might learn that way, but that's not how I learn. Can we do some adjustments here? And I went, whoa, hang on a minute. Right? The words that I was using, because I'm a visual learner, and I would use words like, well, let's draw this, or how can we see this unfolding for you? And the person I was interacting with was more kinesthetic and physical, and they would need to go, okay, well, how do I feel this? Or what do I need to touch to be able to make this happen? And the languaging that I was using was disconnecting with them. And fortunate enough, we had a great relationship that they went, oh, time out. I need you to understand something here that I'm not getting where you're going. You're not laying it down for me to understand what's taking place. And we had a good chuckle about it, and we came back and we got it up and going. Therefore, what I'm sharing with you is know your audience, know your mentees, and be really clear about the intention, what you're attending to, and yeah, you got to throw a lot of smiles in there. I get that. I understand that, but really understand the intention, attention, so that you make sure that whatever you're sharing is going to land. Do you have any stories like that yourself, Doug, in terms of things that happened to you around that?
Well, the maybe not specifically to that, but one of the things as we've been talking that's jumped out for me is the statement you had given, which was when you share, you educate. And right away, the first thing I had was the question, educate who? And where I come from, my philosophy is, because of the practice of mentoring, is that education also includes me as the mentor. So while I'm sharing, I'm also observing how that message, how those words are impacting the person that I'm mentoring. And through that process, I also enhance my ability of being able to use mentoring processes and concepts in a much deeper, richer fashion than perhaps one where I wasn't maybe paying as much attention to what was being shared.
Yes, for sure. And that's why in our own way here, when Doug and I said, hey, let's get together and let's just talk about the words that matter and moving mentoring forward, we said, well, I think it'd probably be a good idea to take a look at what mentoring means, and mentorship and mentor and mentee and some of these kind of words, and just refresh ourselves around some of these. So your point is well taken in terms of being able to really understand these words. And so can I just ask you to give the mentoring definition that we use at IMC?
Sure. It's a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and the mentee are going to learn and grow together on a personal and professional basis.
So in there, there is a word like mentorship, and mentorship is really about the body of concepts and practices that we draw mentoring as an approach, an educating approach from, and therefore tapping into that big body of knowledge and what is actually workable and how you apply it becomes really important when you're mentoring. And in this two-way trusted relationship, sometimes I'll use the word strategic alliance, right? This has really becomes important, and therefore there is a notion of mentor and mentee. And Doug mentioned, okay, both learning professionally and personally. And the mentor being the educator, the mentee being the learner. But Doug and I both, we would also write it in the sky. Guess what? A mentor becomes a mentee, and a mentee becomes a mentor at some point in time in the connection. And that's something important to recognize as you move forward. Anything you want to add around mentorship, mentoring, mentee, mentor at this point in time?
Well, the only thing you talked about the mentor becoming a mentee and a mentee, the mentor. I've actually done some work with organizations where we've established a mentorship program, and part of the process we went through was to identify potential successors to become mentors. And that's what attracted a lot of people to come to the program, was that they knew that they were going to learn something, and from there that progressive learning path was going to take them to where they could start to be the person giving back and providing a deeper, richer mentoring experience to somebody else based on their lived experience that they had just gone through.
Great. Yeah. Well, to be able to also do that is that there's certain terms around mentoring that are really important. For example, we'll use mentoring arrangement, mentoring connection, mentoring direction, or we'll use mentoring structure, mentoring relationship, mentoring strategy. These kind of words, what we're attempting to do is just to remind ourselves is that there's a how, who, and why to mentoring. And when you understand the why, which is the sort of strategy or direction, which is often connected to the contract you're going to use. It's also something you're talking about at the very beginning, about why are we getting together to do this? And then it's really about, well, what's the kind of connection relationship, who are you, who am I, kind of the story that's unfolding that allows us to then figure out how we're going to interact together, the arrangement or the structure. So we just want to remind you that these terms are being used, and we sometimes will talk about the arrangement and the relationship and the direction, or sometimes we might use strategy with connection and structure. So when you're listening to us at IMC, there's sort of a synonymous connection between these words, and we just wanted to bring them forward for you. But there's also a couple of other words that I'd like to bring forward at this point in time as well, is that when you're doing mentoring, it's really important to understand the time and effort, and sometimes money that might go with it. But the time that you're giving to it, the time you're asking of the mentee, the effort you put into it from both parties, it's really about the resources that you're allocating to the arrangement, the connection, the direction that you're taking this. But also, sometimes people will use, okay, well, what's the communication that we're using? Doug and I tend to use a word like collaborative conversations, even though they're connected to communication, but the collaborative conversations hints at that two-way trusted relationship, that strategic alliance arrangement that we've been talking about. And collaboration is really about, okay, can I be assertive as a mentor and a mentee and cooperate with the other person? And therefore, this assertiveness, cooperation, and doing it through a conversation to converse with one another. It's not like one person's got the upper hand over the other. And again, from an IMC point of view, it's not that the mentor is more than the mentee, all right? That's not how we look at it, is because the mentee is asking questions. The mentor, yes, we get that, but guess what? Mentor's asking mentee questions, and sometimes it actually can sort of flip around, and that's why it's such a wonderful two-way trusted relationship and structure that's there. So I just wanted to remind us that sometimes we use words like arrangement, connection, direction, or structure, relationship, and strategy, time and effort, about the resources, the collaborative conversations and communication. These are other terms that we're using when we're helping people to understand about mentoring and to be in service as a mentor and to bring mentorship into organizations, or just bring the mentorship into the connection that you have with that person. Any thoughts you want to add to that at this point?
Nope.
Okay. So the another set of words that I think are important are consistency, confidence, commitment, community, and capacity. And these are 5 that we certainly bring forward, is that in the mentoring, and let's just use mentoring in its widest sense here about arrangement, connection, direction, time and effort, and communication. We'll just use mentoring here, is the consistency that you bring to it. If you're up and down like a yo-yo, for those of you who remember that toy, and you're just sort of, I'm here and then I'm not here, I'm here, I'm not here, and you're not being consistent, it will get picked up. Same for the mentee as well, okay? The confidence that you exude, but not confident so it's overinflated that you're sort of making it up as you go. Okay, you know, this is not about fake it till you make it kind of idea. If you're not quite understanding what you're going to be chatting about as you're mentoring, then slow down a little bit and say, hey, listen, I think we need to explore this together with the mentee. But there's also that commitment, that notion of keeping your promises and being present with it and staying there. And if you're not committed to what's going on, you may need to pull out or find another way in which to go at doing this. And again, it goes for the mentee as well. But sometimes we miss this term a little bit, and it's about the community that you are creating, because there is what's called a ripple effect to mentoring. Yes, there's the mentor and mentee. Well, when the mentee goes back and interacts with others because of what they're learning, there is a bit of a ripple effect that takes place of the mentor and mentee into the community, and vice versa, because as a mentor, you're picking up going, geez, you know, I just learned something really interesting. It was just the way the mentee asked me this question, and I hadn't thought about it before, and then you're sharing it with other people. Is there this notion of community, that level of commonness that unifies us together? And we have to stay with that as well, as how important that is. And then the last piece is under these 5 C's is capacity. So if you're in mentoring, you are wanting to improve focus and strengthen the capacity of the mentee, is that there's a building of capacity, is that new insights, new investigation, new interpretations are brought forward for the mentee, and also the mentor is taking some of it and building the capacity of themselves in terms of mentoring as it goes forward. So those 5 C's, those 5 words are important as well to keep moving mentoring forward. And it's just a reminder to bring them into this conversation, into this presentation. Well, we talk about these 5 C's on other videos in the international mentoring community, and that information is available through our library as well if you want to learn in that way. Thoughts on any one of those 5 C's, Doug?
Yeah, definitely. With the word confidence, and as we've been talking our way through that particular word, I looked at it from the aspect of confidence as a mentor, number one, and you've kind of addressed, you've addressed that one. But the other part is confidence as a mentee, and what that can end up being, just to demonstrate how powerful words can be, or the lack thereof, is that if you are meeting with somebody who doesn't have a lot of confidence in who they are as a person, and struggles with the decision-making process with, a number of different things, is that those words or lack thereof may be a sign or a signal to you as to what may be the root cause of some things you may need to have a conversation about.
For sure. And I think that leans into this notion of the mental health and the mental well-being and the well-being of the mentee from a mentor point of view. And Doug does a lot of work and interacting in the mental health area and how to bring mentoring into the mental health area. So you bring up a really, really great point there. So thanks for that. There's the 5 R's that I think would be worth taking a quick look at. Resilience, reciprocity, reliability, rapport, and relevance. And if we just touch on each one of these. Again, we've done videos on these that you can certainly look through the YouTube channel and find a bit more insights on these. But just as a reminder about these 5 R's to keep moving mentoring forward, the resilience aspect is to be able to deal with a crisis that's unfolding for you, where you might be upset, so you can set something up so that what happens is you move through it, you end up in a better place than where you started, but also you don't go into the dysfunction in sort of the little bit of the little dip that might go with that, and finding a way in which to improve focus and strengthen your resilience. In the weeks ahead, it might be even next week, we're going to bring someone in to have a chat about mentoring and resilience, because we think it's an important topic, and it certainly connects into the mental health world at this point in time. The idea of reciprocity is that this is the notion is that in supporting one another, there is this hope and faith and grace that you will reciprocate. Is that if I ask you a question, there's an answer. If you ask me a question, there's an answer. We will reciprocate. I get it, and Doug has a really wonderful example of this, in one of his stories. Sometimes the mentee may not know what to ask or to reciprocate in that moment, and sometimes that's at the very beginning of mentoring. But as you move along, what reciprocity will start to unfold for you becomes important. But if you don't have the mentee interacting with you and asking you questions or whatever, then you have to go back and take a look at what is taking place, and you may have to dig in a little bit and find out what might be happening for that mentee. The reliability aspect is one where is that you can count on that what is going to happen is going to be happen. I know it connects to commitment and consistency, but the reliability is that you do actually show up in a way that is relatable. All right, it's in a way that the person can go, oh, okay, this is a time for me. I can just be who I need to be because I got some questions I need to ask, and the person's reliable and interact. But reliable in the sense that if I don't know the answer as a mentor, I don't fake it. I don't make up some fluffy wuffy, there's a good mentoring term, fluffy wuffy answer, right? Is that, no, I don't know. Let's figure it out together. These are things that ensure that I have my reliability, and that's what I'm bringing to the conversation. The rapport component is just who I am as a person. And am I one that, yes, I'm relatable, that links back to being reliable, but the rapport is that, hey, I got a smile on. And if I'm not necessarily smiling, I might have to help the mentee understand, geez, last week I also had a little bit of a bit of a downturn and things like that, or I wasn't feeling so well, and or I may not be feeling completely okay today. But to be able to bring the rapport that you can just be natural, no masks, just being natural in the conversation. And we talked a little bit about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and sort of being this notion of natural, all right, is important. And then the relevance aspect of it is, I've heard mentees talk about their mentors, and they go, geez, I've done sessions with this person, and they were off down some rabbit hole. I don't know where they were going, talking about this and that, and it had no relevance to what we were going on. Yeah, it was a great story, but still, I was there looking for other insights, and I didn't need to go down some of these rabbit trails. So make sure that what you're sharing is relevant. And one of the best ways I can say to that is, if you're building a ladder in your mentoring session, make sure that the ladder is against the correct wall. There are times when, the person is saying, hey, listen, it was a useful ladder, but it wasn't against the wall that I was up against. And that's what I needed. I needed something that was a little bit more relevant to what's taking place. So those are the 5 R's that I thought that I would bring up that keep moving mentoring forward. And I thought they might be a reminder just to bring some attention to those. Any thoughts on the 5 R's, Doug?
The one that jumps out the most for me, and you've touched on it already, is the aspect of resilience. And for me, that's part of the mental health story, is resilience, and what are the coping skills that I have to deal with a particular situation or some trauma that has just, that I've been exposed to, no matter how big or small it may be, and what are my coping skills. And, when I take a look back over my own story, it was my family became that resilience body that I would turn to help me with coping with, with mental health and post-traumatic stress and all that.
Okay. Yeah. And that's great, is because we have these other examples that we can pull from in our life, and to be able to draw that. I mean, you used earlier the term lived experience. Each person has lived experience, and if you can tap into it in such a way, especially from an educating approach called mentoring, then it's very valuable to be able to touch bases with those, because there's some really interesting stories we can pull in. Like I have some of my own, not only from the family, but places I've been, things that I have done that I can bring forward. So just as a summary, in a sense, before we go to the Quora question, and maybe there's something else you want to add in here, Doug, before we go to the Quora question. Let me just remind us is that the words like mentor, mentoring, mentorship, mentee, these M-related words are really important, and to make sure that we understand what they mean and how they apply into this thing called mentoring. But also to remind ourselves of words like arrangement and connection and direction, or structure, relationship, strategy, time and effort, and collaborative conversations, remembering those words. Words like consistency, confidence, commitment, community, capacity. How do we weave those words into the mentoring we're doing? The resilience, reciprocity, reliability, rapport, relevance, these words, how are we weaving those in? And is the mentee that you're interacting with as a mentor, are they clear? All right. Do they make sense to that person and to you? And don't take them for granted. And sometimes it's worth just touching base with the mentee and just, hey, how are we doing from a resilience point of view? Or how are we doing from a direction point of view? Walk me through where we are from your commitment and my commitment. Let's have a chat about those kind of things. These are words that you can constantly bring in to keep moving this mentoring forward. Those are my thoughts in terms of bringing it together. Any sort of summary comments that you wanted to bring out at this point, Doug?
Well, 2 things. The first is the aspect of relevance and your lived experience. And the aspect is, where I come from, is to make sure that if I am going to share my lived experience, that it's relevant to that particular moment in time in the mentee's conversation with you. So that's that part. My second thing is a question for you, which is there a difference from a mentoring perspective between the written word and the spoken word?
Very good point. Well, often when I think of the written word, I think of that freezing is there for a little longer. Whereas the spoken word tends to be, it's there, but it melts away a little bit faster. So if I'm in conversation with someone from a mentoring point of view, the words that I'm using are freezing all the imagery that's in that person's mind, and then we're speaking with it. But if I'm using a written quote, or there's notes that go out afterwards, or some follow-up written book that you might go, then the freezing of that reality holds a little bit longer. And sometimes what I have to remember is that I have to purposely unfreeze some words, right? And a mentee might bring something, I might go, can we just take a look at that word? And what I'm asking them to do is, let's just loosen that word up a little. Let's unfreeze that word. Let's take a look at it and see, does it actually apply? And that really works in the spoken. Sometimes it takes a little bit more if you're doing written. If someone writes something to you, all right, you can still get at it, but that's sort of the spoken tends to, you can unfreeze it and a little bit quicker, you can melt it. Whereas written, it tends to hang around a little bit longer, and you've got to work with it a bit more. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I wasn't anticipating that, so I appreciate it. That was a great question. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, because that's what I mentioned at the very beginning, but I didn't really dig into it a little bit. So thank you for that. Appreciate that. Well, why don't we go to the Quora question? Because I don't see anyone in chat asking us anything at this point in time.
Okay.
And why don't we do the Quora question?
Sounds good. So a bit of background for our listeners on the Quora. So Quora is a website that you can go to, and you can post questions on a number of different topics. The ones that I typically address are mentoring and business mentoring, and I have been fairly consistent in being in the top 10 writers or respondents to questions for gosh knows how long now. So what I typically try to do is if there's a specific question that seems to be a common thing that people are asking about, I usually take that and respond to it. In this particular case, this is something that is a question, ironically, talks about words in a small sense, but the question is, I'm not sure what to talk about with my mentor / mentee. What are some common topics? And so my response was, common topics mentees seek to work on with their mentors often include communication skills, leadership skills, networking, work-life balance, learning organizational culture, and management skills. Communication skills can include active listening / hearing, trigger words in a conversation, body language, crucial conversations, etc. Leadership skills can include how to motivate employees, the difference between being a boss and being a leader. I work with a lot of new managers / leaders to get them to reflect on their past week to see what went well, what didn't go well, and what will we do differently next time. A common concern of a lot of people today is the aspect of work-life balance, especially with more and more people working from home. It has also added to their stress level, and in some cases has increased levels of depression. A good mentor will sense your hesitancy to begin the dialogue, and he / she can revert to sharing some of their lived experience that is relevant to what you had planned on talking about. As a mentor, it is important to use this time wisely to share lived experiences, as that helps with the mentee's growth.
So from your own experiences, that a lot of what you shared here has a connection to the workplace.
Yep.
But there are other topics that you can bring up, and I'm sort of going through the work-life balance, right? Because sometimes in the mentoring conversation, it's not just necessarily about the workplace, it's about other things in life. Isn't that true?
That's true, yes.
And that's where that sometimes the mental health topics pop up, right?
Yep.
And you might head down that path, but it might be related to work, but it might be related to relationships at home and things like that. How do you deal with when you know that the mentoring arrangement was set up in the workplace, but a lot of the conversation in today, like for example, one of the sessions has a lot to do with being home situations. Do you deal with it, or do you say, hey, listen, this is something separate? How do you deal with that, just in case a mentor finds themselves there?
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up because I just had that conversation the last couple of days with an organization who wants to have a mentorship program with the primary focus of career development. And what I'm trying to get them to appreciate and understand is that it goes beyond that. And that in order to be able to help somebody evolve with their career development, their professional life, so to speak, we need to look at the personal side first, the personal growth aspect. So, and I typically self-esteem, self-confidence, self-doubt, self-worth, all of those, all the selves, as I call them. We need to take a look at some of those to be able to make sure that everything, that you've kind of got your house in order to, for us to be able to move forward. And so the conversations that I've had with some organizations is we can put the message out there that the primary focus is on career development. However, that we will, if the messaging is such that, or the story or the conversation is such that I get a sense that there's some underlying things we need to talk about, we're going to talk about those first. And then we'll be able to move on and be more successful with the mentoring relationship.
And I'll add a little cautionary note here is sometimes you have to understand how far your conversation as a mentor is moving into the world of the shifter in terms of helping someone actually shift, because you can't make up their mind for them, right? But also you got to be very alert to the line where you might be crossing over and going into the world of counseling as a mentor. And therefore, there is a cautionary note that we offer here. And that's why as you get involved with the international mentoring community and you get an opportunity to interact with Doug, Doug is really great at understanding where those lines are and where you color in the lines, and if you color outside the lines, what might happen. And so I bring that forward as well at this point. Well, I think, Doug, we're getting pretty close to a close down on this broadcast of the All Things Mentoring Lounge with the International Mentoring Community. And certainly thank everyone for being here. I just wanted to remind us is that if you were looking for the episode that would have possibly happened on May the 11th, it didn't happen. So I just want to acknowledge is that we didn't have a live broadcast on the 11th. So don't go looking for it. So the 4th and the 18th, and we'll be picking this up again as we move forward. Sometimes that happens. We do our best to get at least 50 of the 52 weeks in, but sometimes holidays get in there or other things that are happening in our lives and we don't make it. So I just want to acknowledge that. But like all IMC videos for the Mentoring Lounge, Doug gets to have the final words. I get to bring him in. Doug gets to take us out. And so when I know that we're done, I'm just going to say, take care, and I'm going to end the broadcast. So Doug, your thoughts taking us out?
The most important thing that I hope that I know I certainly took away from this was the significance and or importance of words and the power that those words have in a mentoring relationship. So I encourage those of you that have listened in to pass the message on to your colleagues and invite them to listen to our podcast today and go from there.
Wonderful. Take care, everyone.
Take care.